Okay, so here we are in episode 3. In the previous episode, we made this set of low poly trees and added some basic materials to them. In this episode, we are going to make some basic furniture and other objects and learn a few new modeling techniques. So we're not going to need the trees. So first thing we want to do is uncheck the tree collection, just so it's not displaying those and we don't have to worry about them getting in the way. Then select the scene collection. Right click on it and choose new collection, double click on that collection too and rename it. Let's rename it items. That'll be good enough for now. That's general enough. You might want to in the future do like props, furniture, things like that, but for now we're just going to do a one category to collect them all. Make sure that's selected so that any new objects we create are automatically added to that collection. And now we'll start by making a basic rock. Rocks are something you're going to need. We have trees. We're going to need some rocks. So go up to Add, Mesh, and we're going to want to add an icosphere. If you still have it open from before, it'll be set to 3 subdivisions. If it's set to 2, you can just bump that up to 3. That should be good for what we're doing here right now. And then we're going to tab into edit mode, and sort of like what we did with the tops of the deciduous trees in the previous tutorial, we're going to go to the vertex select a few vertices around our rock, make sure proportional editing is turned on, and the random, and then we're going to go to the scale tool and we're going to squish it down. Alright, and we're just going to start squishing it a little bit in, and you can scroll your mouse wheel to change the random effect of that proportional editing tool. Now what I'd like to do is go turn that proportional editing tool off for a moment, hit A to select all of the vertices, and now we're just going to squish it, sort of like that, and then squish it along the side here. And now you see we actually have a pretty decent looking boulder. And so using a combination of just scaling the whole object and then scaling just selected vertices using the proportional editing tool with this random fall off, you can get a pretty decent looking rock. So if we tab back into the face mode, that looks like a pretty good low poly rock to me. So we'll go ahead and move that to the side, and we'll move on to our next object. So now I'd like to go ahead and make a picture frame. This is a really easy object to make and is going to be something that'll be really useful to you in the background of a lot of different interior shots. So add, mesh, and you want to add a cube. And now we are going to hit tab to go into edit mode. Hit 1 on the number pad to go to the front view. Make sure that proportional editing is turned off. And then you're going to just move this up while holding the control key so that it snaps, so that it is aligned with its pivot point. Just like we did with the trunks in the previous episode, we want this cube to have its pivot point on one of its faces. So then tab back into object mode, hit the scale tool, and we're going to scale this down quite a bit. Alright, we want to almost flat, not completely. This is basically going to be the thickness of our picture frame. Alright, so now we've got that centered up. Hit tab to go back into edit mode, and we want to have the face select on, and select that front face. We're going to hit E to extrude, hit escape on the keyboard to cancel that free move, hit S to scale, and we're just going to bring it in just a little bit. And this, as you can see, is sort of creating the shape of a picture frame. So now we'll hit E again to extrude, escape to cancel the move, and then just bring it down on the Z-axis a little bit, and just inset that like that. And now you can see we've got a basic picture frame. So if we go back into the object mode, then if we wanted to scale it a little bit more, you can do that. And that gives us a very sort of standard looking picture frame. Now you might want to make these these sides here a little bit bigger if you scaled the whole thing in, because they'll get shrunk just a little bit. So to do that, just select both of the faces with Shift Select. So they're both selected. And we're going to hit 7 to go into the top mode. And then hit the scale tool. From there, we can just sort of adjust how big they are. And so we're sort of just pulling them together there. So that's pretty good. Hold Shift on the keyboard while you're doing this, and that'll give you sort of a fine control over where you are. And that looks pretty good there. Okay, so now you can hit Tab, go back into object mode, and that gives us a basic picture frame. So let's go ahead and move that guy out of the way. Okay, so up next, let's go ahead and just save our file real quick. And now we're going to go to Add, Mesh, and this time we're going to choose a cylinder. And we have, right now it's set to 6. If you're in a fresh new file, it'll be set to 32. We're going to bump this up. Let's make this like 12. I think that should be good. Yeah, that's looking about right to me. Now we want to tab into edit mode. We're going to do the same thing as far as resetting the pivot point. So we get your grab tool and then use Control to snap it and set that pivot point to that bottom face there. All right, so this just really helps when you're placing objects later, that's sort of hits the ground plane. You can have the pivot point right on the ground. Now we want to just grab the top face there, and we're just let's just pull that up just a little bit more. So this is going to become our barrel, and so what we want to do is we're going to take both the top and bottom face. So that's Shift Select to get both of them. Then we're going to hit E to extrude, escaped. Then we're going to go up and change this to individual origins, and then hit S to scale. And we're going to sort of inset this a little bit. We hit extrude again. Now we have to go back to bounding box. We're going to use our scale tool and scale it on Z. And that's just going to give us sort of the rim or the lip of our barrel there. And now we want to throw in some loop cuts. So hit the loop cut tool. And we're going to want to put them in sets. So we want sort of a band up here. So we'll put 2 up here. All right, and then we want 2 at the bottom as well, about the same distance from the bottom, something like that. And then we want 2 in the middle. So this one we can just do 1, and then we're going to do 2 there. And the reason that I recommend doing it like that is it's just a little bit easier than having to throw them all in there equidistant apart and then do what I'm doing now, which is scaling them to make the distance between them a little bit smaller. I think it's just a little bit easier to do it with the click and drag into place. All right, so now that we've got these 3 sort of bands defined there, go into the face select, and we're just going to select all of the faces in these. And so you can either Shift Select or go a few over and hit Control Select. Just be careful because the Control Select will always take the shortest path, so it might not be the path you want. So you just want to do a few at a time. But then for the next band, hold Shift, select it, and then you can continue with your Control Select for like 2 or 3 at a time. And then the last band again, Shift Select, and then Control Select around to get all of those. Okay, and so what we're going to do now is we're going to hit Extrude again, E on the keyboard, Escape. Make sure we're in bounding box center and hit Scale, S on the keyboard. We're going to scale them up, and as you can see, they're a little funky, but we're going to make some slight adjustments that are going to make those better. So that's a little much. I'm going to scale them back in just a little bit. And so we just want to basically make them extruded just a little bit, because these are going to be sort of the iron bands that hold our barrel together. So what we want to do now is this batch here, we can go ahead and reselect just the middle ring. And then we'll scale those on the Z-axis again so that they're about like that. And then we'll do the same for this up here. These we'll have to reposition a little bit first before we scale them. So hit the move tool, and it's good to go into the front mode on this one. And then we'll just sort of bring those down a little bit. Hit the scale again. Scale those down to about something like that. Okay, select them all. Move tool on Z. And then scale them just a little bit. I think that looks pretty good. And that's going to give us the basics of our barrel. I want to do a little something to make them bow out in the middle just a little bit. So we go up here, and this button here is the toggle X-ray, which lets us sort of see through our object and select vertices and faces on the other side. All right, so we're going to hit 1 to go in the front mode. Let's go to the vertex mode, and we're going to drag select everything here except for our sort of top lid part. So we get all of these faces in the middle. All right, now we're going to go into our vertical, hit S to scale, and just bring it up just a little bit. All right. And then we're going to do the same thing again, but we're going to click away just to deselect, and then we're just going to select this center band here. Oops, I got one in the back. So just select this center band here, and then S to scale, and we're just going to bring that out just a little bit. And now when we tab back into object mode, we have a pretty good low poly barrel. So I'm just going to scale that down just a little bit, and maybe a little bit on the vertical axis there. I think that looks like a pretty good barrel though. All right, let's move that over. All right, let's move all these guys over a little bit more, just give us some more space to work with. We will come back to them. So for our next object, we're going to just make a real basic chair. So add in mesh cube, and we'll go into the front mode. Tab into edit mode. This time though, what we're going to do, we'll reset the pivot point at the end of what we're doing. So right now you can just scale this down, and we'll make it about like that. Let's make it a little bit smaller. All right, something about like that, let's say. And now let's make sure we turn off that X-ray mode that we had on earlier, and we want to throw some loop cuts in there because loop cuts are my favorite. And then we're going to go up here, choose one of the tools here to get out of the loop cut interface. Select the face select, and we're going to select all the faces on this side of our object. All right. So with all those selected, we're going to then hit delete on the keyboard, and we're going to delete faces. Go into the modifiers properties tab, choose add modifier, go down to mirror, and then we're going to need to set this to Y. And now anything that we do to this side of the object will be mirrored on the other side of the object automatically. This is really, really helpful for when you're making something that is symmetrical, like a chair. And what we want to do is put in a few loop cuts. So we're going to put one in going long ways this way, click and drag it to the edge, about like that. And then we're going to put some in going perpendicular to that. We're going to do one going this way. You might want to go into the vertical view, and you want to position that so that it sort of makes a small square in this corner. And then you'll put in one more on the other side. And from here, these are going to be what are going to be the source of our legs and of the back of the chair. So now with those loop cuts in, we want to go into the move tool with the face mode selected, and you want to go down underneath, and you want to grab those two squares on the bottom. We're going to hit E to extrude, and then we'll move those down on the Z-axis. As you can see, the other legs extend as we extend our first legs. So you just want to make them to a proportion that feels good for sort of a low poly cartoon chair. So now we want to make the back of the chair a little seat cushion, and that'll do it for this guy. So first things first, we'll make the, let's make the seat cushion first. So select this face here, hit extrude, hit escape, S to scale, and so this time what we want to do is we want to bring it over here in the middle. Now we're going to put on this clipping, and it should, yeah, now it won't let us, see, it'll sort of stops there, and we can do that. But what we want to do here is now if we scale it, it just scales this way. So it basically, with the clipping on, it sticks it to the other edge and makes it so we can just adjust it like that. And now that we've got it sort of sized like we want, we just want to pull it up. And that'll sort of bring up a little cushion on top of our chair there. Okay, and so now for the back of the chair, we want to go here, select that corner, hit E to extrude, and now we're going to bring this up. And what we want to do is we want to incorporate enough geometry to be able to connect it across and make the back of the chair. So I would say to about here, then we're going to hit extrude again. Okay, and then bring it up to there, extrude again, and then we'll make a little cap on the top. And then from here, we're going to take this guy here, again, E to extrude, and then we're going to bring it in. And this time when they connect, they'll sort of merge together. And so now we have this chair. I'd kind of like to slope the back just a little bit. So if we grab that and this here, turn on the X-ray tool, we're actually just going to grab all of this upper portion here, and we're just going to slide it back just a little bit. All right, and then we're just going to rotate it just a little bit, and that's going to give us, I think, a pretty nice looking little chair. Maybe a little farther. There we go. Hit tab to go back into our object mode, and that's looking like a pretty good chair. The last thing that we need to do is we need to align the pivot point. So go into the front mode, or hit 3, we'll go into the side mode because it's easier to see there. Hit tab to go back into edit mode, A to select all, use the move tool, and we're just going to slide the whole thing up, and right to, so that the bottom faces are right there on our axis and aligned with the pivot point, so that then the pivot point lines up for our chair. Okie doke. Okay, so next we're going to make a table. So add mesh, and we're going to go cube again, and we're going to scale this down. This is going to become our tabletop, so we want it to be kind of small. And we're going to spread that out about like that. Something about there, that's pretty good. Let's make it a little bit thinner. So that'll be good for our tabletop. And then we're going to need to make sort of the legs and the sort of frame of the table. To do that, we're going to just go ahead and Shift D to duplicate our tabletop. And then we'll just reshape the tabletop into those other pieces. So here we go. This will become, let's move this down. This will become sort of the frame of our table. Something like this. Okay, now we could just duplicate this and move it over here, but we can just use that mirror modifier actually to have the computer do it for us. So add modifier and choose mirror, and this time we want to do mirror object. You have this little eyedropper here, click the eyedropper, click the tabletop. Now it's going to use the tabletop as the point that it's going to mirror across. And so as you can see here, it has added a second one of these. If we just grab this one and move it around, it moves the other one in relation to it. If we scale one, the other one scales as well. So now we have mirrored that side. We're going to do the same thing to this side here, but all we have to do is do Shift D to duplicate, rotate 90 degrees by holding the Control key, and then you can see in the upper left of your screen, it'll show the rotation, and with Control held, it'll snap in 5-degree increments. So we're going to do that, and then we can just move it into place like so. Okay, but now we want to change the axis that it's going to mirror on from X to Y. All right, so we turned off the X, turned on the Y, and now it's mirroring where we want. We want to shrink this down with the scale tool. All right, and just make sure we're in position where we want it. Okay, I'd say that's looking pretty good. Just save real quick. Now we want to put in some legs, so we can just use basically the same object again. Shift D to duplicate, and let's get rid of the mirror modifier for now, and we're just going to zoom in on the object, and let's shape that into a leg. So let's make that a little bit thicker this direction like that. So about like that. And then, okay, so then we'll go ahead and put this in the corner here. About like that. Okay, so now we can also use that mirror modifier again to distribute our legs. So we're going to add modifier, we're going to do mirror object, we're going to do that there, and then we're just going to add another one. Since we don't need to change the shape of our legs, we just need another set put over here, so we'll just add another mirror modifier, go here, choose duplicate, and then we'll just change this up to go on Y, and we'll turn off the X, and now we have a table that we were able to make very, very quickly just out of some boxes. So now we have this, but in order to move it, we have to select everything, and then the pivot point's in sort of a weird place. So we do want to do one extra thing here that's going to be very, very helpful to us. So we're going to do add empty plain axes, all right? And then we're going to select all of the objects in our table, and we'll hit the 3 to go in the side view, and we'll just get it so that it is lined up so that the center of the tabletop is aligned with the center of the empty, and then the bottom of the legs are aligned with sort of the ground plane here, the 0 Z position. And from there, with all of those selected, you're going to shift select the empty, hit Control P to parent, you can go to parent to object. All right, and now if we grab just the empty, we can grab with the G, and when we move it around, everything moves together. But now we can grab individual pieces and edit those if we need to. So that's a very helpful way to keep these sort of loose pieces together as a single object. Let's go ahead and save, and we can actually shrink our table down a little bit. It's a little bit too big. So grab the empty, S to scale, and then we can just scale the whole table down a little bit. That works for me. And then we'll just move it over so we have some more room to work with. Just move everybody over. Again. All right. Save our file. Okay, up next we are going to make a shelving unit. And the interesting thing about this is it's not only just going to be a shelving unit, but it's going to be something that we can use to generate shelving units of any number of shelves that we would like. So go up and add, mesh, cube, and we're going to center up on that with the number pad period. go into the edit mode. We're going to squish this down with the sizing tool, with the scale tool, and then we're going to bring it in, squish it down a little bit more. And this is going to sort of be about the thickness of what we want our shelf to be, roughly the dimensions of that. It's going to be a little bit bigger on this direction and this direction, but we want the thickness of it to be about what we want our shelf to be. So I think that looks like a good proportion. Then of course we're going to hit the loop cut tool, because that's one of my favorite tools ever, and we're going to put in some loop cuts. So this one we're going to do 2 going this way, and so you'll set that to 2, and then we want to go over to the scale option, make sure we're on the bounding box, and we're going to scale that out. And we want it to be about the same thickness here as the thickness of our shelf, because this is going to then define the sides of the shelf. So now we want to do one more loop cut going the other direction. Click and drag that into place. Go into the top view, make sure that that is about the same thickness as the other sides. Good. Then we'll make sure the X-ray tool is off. And then we'll go into the face select and select all the faces around here with a shift select. There we go. And now we're going to hit E to extrude, escape to cancel the free move, make sure we're on the bounding box, and we're going to go to the scale tool and we'll scale on Z, and you're just going to scale it up a bit to about like that. I think that's probably pretty good there. Now that is going to be one shelf unit, and so we're going to use an array modifier in order to make a whole bunch of these, and we can just plug in as many as we want. But we also want to make some end caps, so we want to duplicate this, Shift D to duplicate, and we're going to move this over here, and then we're going to do it one more time, Shift D to duplicate, and move it over. And so what we're going to want to do here is we're just going to want to adjust the height of the top and the height of the bottom so that it'll make sense as a top and bottom cap. So here's how we're going to do that. Tab into edit mode on one of them. So we just want the top faces here, and then we're just going to bring them down. And then we want to do basically the opposite to the bottom. Select it, tab into edit mode, just get those bottom faces, and then we're going to bring those up, do about like that. I think that's pretty good. Go and rename these real quick in their item properties, and we'll call this one shelf. We'll call this one bottom shelf, and then top shelf. Okay. And so we can just sort of move these guys over. All right, so select the shelf and go into the modifiers, add modifier, choose array. And so as you can see, it made a copy of it, but it put it on the x-axis, and we want it on the z-axis. So change the factor x to 0, enter, and change z to 1. And now by changing the count here, you can change the number of shelves you have. Go back to 2. All right, so now, as you can see, put in a copy there. We can set how many shelves we want here, but let's hook up the end caps first. So down at the bottom, you have the option for caps, cap start and cap end. So for the cap start, we're going to click the bottom one, and for the cap end, we're going to click the top shelf. And now, let's go ahead and hide the bottom and top. Oops. Top shelf, bottom shelf. And now by adjusting the number, the count number, we can adjust how many shelves are on this shelving unit. So the minimum is going to be 3, but then we can make them any size we like. And so that's a real fun little tool anytime you have something that needs to be repeated. So in this case, we used it to repeat a shelf, but you could use it to repeat like sections of a fence. You can use it to repeat all sorts of things. If you want to do like rows of corn or vegetables and stuff in a garden, that's a very easy way to do it. You can actually do multiple dimensional arrays as well. So if you did like before, when we had 2 mirror modifiers going, you can do the same thing with 2 arrays and be able to have an array that goes in the Z direction and then another array of that array going in the Y or X direction as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and move this out of the way. So this one, unfortunately, you don't get the pivot point lining up with the ground, but that's the sacrifice you have to make for that modifier. All right, so up next, we have one more object that I want to make in this tutorial before we wrap it up, and that is we're going to make a sword. A cool low poly sword. So add a mesh, cube, and tab into edit mode. And now we're going to go up and with all of the faces of our cube selected, hit face, and then we're going to extrude individual faces, escape, change the pivot point to individual origins, S to scale, and just scale it down a little bit. And then change it back over to bounding box, S to scale again, and scale it up. And we're just sort of adding some facets to this, what's going to be our pommel of our sword. So grab the top face, hit E to extrude, hit escape to cancel the move, S to scale, and just scale it down just a little bit. And now we're going to hit E to extrude again, and now we're going to just pull that up on the Z axis, and we're going to pull sort of the handle. So give it a good, hand and a half hilt to it. And now we want to make the quillions and the hilt for the blade to be mounted into. So we're going to want to do E to extrude, go up just a little bit. Okay, and now let's grab these 2 faces on the other sides, go E to extrude again, change to individual origins, S to scale, back to the bounding box center, and we're going to scale them out like this. We're going to just bring it out pretty good here. Like I'm thinking we might even want to just do this, grab these top ones, the move tool, and bring them up a little bit and give it a little bit more meat to it. That's good. And now let's do this. Extrude these guys. Make sure that you're on the bounding box, and we're going to bring this out, and then we're going to go back to the go to the side here. Do it sort of like this, and this is just sort of making some cool details on the hilt of our sword. So now grab these sides here, and let's bring these down a little bit, scale them down. That's cool. And E to extrude, and then we're going to use the scale tool to pull these out, and let's taper these down a little bit, bring them in a little bit. This is just using the transform gizmo for the scale. And let's use the move tool and maybe extend them up a little bit like that. I think that looks pretty cool. And so on the ends here, we're just going to extrude out a little bit. So E to extrude again, S to scale to bring them out, and then back into the individual origins, S to scale them down. And then maybe use the move tool to just bring them up a little bit. I think that's pretty good. Let's bring them in just a little bit with the bounding box and the scale tool. Just basically want to taper that edge. I don't want it to be super sharp, but we don't want to add too much geometry to it either. So that gives us a hilt to our sword. That's pretty good. Tab back into edit mode. We're going to need to throw in some loop cuts in order to make our blade, because we need a loop cut that goes right down the middle of the blade. So throw in one loop cut right through the middle of this thing, right there. That should be pretty good. Now hit the move tool, back into the face select and get these faces on the top here. And this is going to then become our blade. So E to extrude, escape to cancel the move. And now we're just going to scale it in like this using the scale tool, and then extrude again. And we're going to go on the Z axis and we're going to pull the blade up. Just make the blade nice and big. Make it about like that. And so you want to go up for a while, and then you're going to do another extrude for the tip. And so for this, we're actually going to do some slight shaping here. So first things first, we want to merge all of these vertices at the top into a single one so it comes to a point. So go into vertex select and then just hit M on the keyboard, brings up the merge menu, and choose at center, and that's going to turn all those into a point. Now we want to sort of accentuate the edge of our blade, and as you can see, it's not really doing that. It's sort of very dull. So let's sharpen this thing up. So we can just select these three vertices here, hit M at center, and we're just going to merge these guys down on either side. And then we're going to go down here and we're going to do the same thing. So select one of the points, hit the period on your number pad, and it'll zoom you to it, and then you can easily select the other ones. Hit M, choose at center, and do the same thing over here. M at center, and now you should have a pretty good sword. So tab, go back into the face mode, and that's pretty good. I think I'm actually going to make a slight adjustment. So tab back into edit mode. Let's go into 3, hit 3 on the number pad to go into the right viewport. And now what I want to do, let's just take this one here and this vertex here, select those, scale tool, make sure you're on the bounding box. And we're just going to bring those in a little bit so that the blade tapers ever so slightly. And I think that to me is going to be a pretty cool sword. Let's make it a little bit taller. So you can, of course, adjust this however you like. It's your world, it's your sword. I think I'm actually going to just scale the entire tip down just a little bit so that it gives this cool sort of taper to the blade. There we go. Okay, that brings us to the end of this episode. In the next episode, we're going to start putting some textures on these objects. If you enjoyed this tutorial, I have other tutorials in the works, so hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on them. And if you really like this tutorial, in the description there is a link to my Patreon. So head on over there, and my supporters get exclusive asset packs and other cool stuff I have made over the years for animation, VFX, video production, Dungeons & Dragons, all sorts of stuff. Alrighty, thanks for watching. Cheers.